Now, is this going to work?
Yes.
Oh, it didn't work.
It did?
216
was the last.
Assalamu alaikum.
This is yours.
إن الحمد لله تعالى نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا ومن يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. Indeed, all praise is due to Allah. We praise Him. We seek refuge with Allah from the evil in our soul and from our sinful deeds. Those who are guided by Allah, no one can misguide them. Those who are not guided by Allah, there is no guide for them. I bear witness that there is no God, there is no deity worthy of worship except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is His servant and messenger. O you who believe, revere Allah as He should be revered, and die not except as Muslims. Amma ba'd, to proceed. Welcome to ISLAM Inc., the Islamic Society Leading American Muslims, an organization founded to conduct da'wah, to present the true and peaceful message of Islam in the United States of America and anywhere else we get a chance, and then to educate and empower those people that come to the faith. And so what you will see in this family, ISLAM Inc. family, is that we have people that were both born into Islam and people that reverted. We call those the ones that were born into Islam, the Ansars, and the Muhajirs are those that are migrating this way. So we have created a family of support here. We welcome you here. Who's here for the first time? Anybody today? That's very unusual, but I just want to share again, I always like to reiterate this, that we have a no judgment policy here, a no condemnation policy, a no criticism policy. If you can't say something good, you're in the wrong place. We just like to put that out there. I've never seen anybody be nurtured or grow when people are being condemned, castigated, criticized, and all of those C words, whatever they mean. So we're here to hold your hand, to nurture you so that you can develop a sustainable level of faith, otherwise known as Iman in Arabic, faith. So that's what we want to do. I'd like to call your attention to a faded announcement on the board up here. We are going to establish, inshallah, a fathers group October the 5th at 8:30 a.m. at 2713 Parkland Drive, and that happens to be my therapy office. If you're not a father yet, you're invited to become, because chances are you will be. And we're just trying to help people understand your role as a male in the community, the Islamic community, and to empower you as such, so that we can also talk about our struggles and learn from each other. So I'm very excited about this. It's something I've wanted to do for a long time. I think we'll probably have some young men there that are not married, and that'll be really neat for them to hear from married men. Islam has done a great job, our communities, of talking about the role of the mother, being the footstool of the paradise, and being respected 3 times more than the father. But we really haven't done a good job of really empowering our men to understand the beauty of their role and the sensitivity of their role. And every week in my practice, I meet men that have no clue about their role, and that's why I decided to do this. Every week we do phone drive and food drive. If you have any cell phones that you're not using, if you'll give them to us, we will. Those phones get turned into phones to help victims of domestic violence. And also every week we try to collect dry food, beans, canned foods, anything that's a dry stable, and then we give it to the homeless shelters. Something you may not know about, you don't see it here, but we also collect from some of the bread places here in Orlando, and we take that to the Salvation Army, as well as clothing that comes our way and other things. So we've been talking about the miracles of the Holy Quran, and Anybody like to share anyone or anything that comes up for you about that? Okay, not everybody's jumping at the same time, so that's all right. Today we're going to begin to talk about photosynthesis. This is mentioned in the Holy Quran. We're going to talk about that, and inshallah we're going to talk about some other things and then break up into a group. And Lori's going to facilitate that for me because I'm going to be leaving today to go and be with my mother for her 78th birthday. So I will be praying for you as I'm traveling today on the train, inshallah. So in Surah Takwir, the overthrowing, which is Surah 81, verses 17 and 18, and I swear by the night when it draws in or falls, and by the dawn when it breathes in. And of course this is talking about photosynthesis, and I looked up in old Webster how he said what photosynthesis is, and he said it's the process by which green plants and other organisms synthesize carbohydrates from carbon dioxide and water using light as an energy source and usually releasing oxygen as a byproduct. And so that's what this verse is referring to. So we'll talk about that just a little bit. And what I'd like you to do is, if you know anything about this, particularly if I've got any science teachers here or anything that you could add to this, feel free to raise your hand and chime in and share about this. When plants undergo photosynthesis, they take in carbon dioxide, a harmful gas that human beings cannot consume. They take it in from the air and give off oxygen instead. Oxygen, which we breathe and which is our basic source of life, is the main product of photosynthesis. Some 30% of the oxygen in the atmosphere is produced by plants on land, the remaining 70% being produced by plants and single-celled living things in the seas and the oceans. So it's pretty phenomenal that you think that those trees that we learn about, this is 7th grade science, right, teachers that are with me? Yeah. Those trees that are actually breathing, they actually have a respiratory system. They are taking in stuff that would normally kill us and putting out stuff that actually gives us oxygen. And I think this is pretty interesting. I don't know if everybody here knows, but there's a book out there called The Oxygen Revolution, and it's all about hyperbaric oxygen treatment. And in Asia, whenever a person has a stroke, they put them into a hyperbaric oxygen treatment. Now, hyperbaric oxygen treatments were originally used in the Navy for people that had the bends. So for divers, they would go deep in the water, they would go try to come up too quickly, and the buoyancy would cause problems, and then they would have to put them in this hyperbaric oxygen chamber. Now, I have done, 80 treatments, Narendra? I've done 80 hyperbaric oxygen treatments because they have discovered that if you take a person to 1.8 atmospheric pressures and give them 100% oxygen, it reactivates the inactive brain cells that one develops during a stroke. So I've been doing that, and Allahu Alam, I couldn't afford the $2,000 test before and after to see just how many cells got activated. But I feel good about it, and it's exciting. And if you think about it, about 6 or 7 years ago, they began to establish oxygen bars in Europe. So you would actually go in and have some pure oxygen. We also know now that they're using oxygen chambers for burn victims. So there's a lot of healing in oxygen. It's amazing. Yes, sister?
They used to think Michael Jackson was crazy because of that.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, there was a gentleman, 95 years of age, that's talked about in the Oxygen Revolution book. He was a professor, and he had a stroke. He purchased his own hyperbaric oxygen chamber, hired somebody to administer this to him in his home, and he gave a speech later after that, and someone asked him a 3-point question, and he was able to repeat that, remember it throughout the whole thing, and then give his answers for all 3 parts. So I think there's definitely something to it, and of course I think it's interesting that this has only been discovered. This book was just written in the last, I think, 2 years, and here we see about it in the Holy Quran. You just have to be able to dig a little deeper, reflect a little deeper, and contemplate a little deeper. And I try, after last week's class, I heard someone say in the class, what is this, a science class? It was a little heavy, but you know, I wanted you to see the greatness of what is found in our Holy Quran, and how that people that have spent years and years of their life still don't understand it. And I don't think everybody heard Warren's joke, but when I was telling about the professor that studied the patterns of birds in flight for 20 years and he hadn't figured it out, Warren said, well, he must have really had a bird brain. I thought that was hysterical. Warren got so tickled he couldn't contain himself, he had to leave. He came back, alhamdulillah. So some 30% of the oxygen in the atmosphere is produced by plants on land, the remaining 70% being produced by plants and single-celled living things in the seas and the ocean. I just think it's amazing how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala works and how we see so many signs in His creation, mashallah. Photosynthesis is a complete process and one which scientists have still not yet fully understood. This process cannot be observed with the naked eye because the mechanism employs atoms and molecules. However, we can see the results of photosynthesis in the oxygen which enables us to breathe and in the foodstuffs that keep us alive. Photosynthesis is a system which involves complicated chemical formula and units of weight on very small scale and consisting of the most sensitive equilibriums. So I never cease to be amazed when I see this. There are trillions of chemical laboratories, I almost said laboratories because that's how they say it in South Africa, that carry out this process in all the green plants around us. Plants have been meeting our oxygen, food, and energy needs non-stop for millions of years. The productivity of photosynthesis is measured by the level of oxygen output. The greatest point is in the morning when the sun's rays are most concentrated. At dawn, the leaves begin to perspire or sweat, and photosynthesis increases accordingly. In the afternoon, the opposite applies. Photosynthesis slows down and respiration increases because as the temperature rises, perspiration also increases. So the same way that we as humans perspire when it gets hot, so are the trees. I think it's amazing. At night, as the temperature falls, perspiration declines and the plants rest. And here's a beautiful picture. I thought this picture really painted it nicely, of the sun coming through the trees and a great demonstration of photosynthesis. The previous slide demonstrates that light is one of the most essential elements in the performance of photosynthesis. Photosynthesis varies in proportion to the intensity and duration of the light source. With the reception of the sun's rays in the morning, photosynthesis, in other words, the production of oxygen begins. MashaAllah. The term إِذَا تَنَفَّسَ, or actually tanafas, because it's at the end of the sentence, so when you stop you don't pronounce the fatha, in Surah Al-Takwir, in reference to the morning hours, in other words, when it breathes in, is a metaphorical reference to breathing, respiration, or breathing deeply. This term particularly emphasizes the way that the production of oxygen begins in the morning and that the greatest levels of oxygen essential for respiration are given off at that time. The way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala indicates the action of photosynthesis is among the most important discoveries of the 20th century in this verse, is another of the scientific miracles of the Holy Quran. Just another pretty picture of the dew on these lilies, mashallah. Photosynthesis is used by plants and sometimes by certain bacteria and single-cell life forms of the sun's rays in order to produce sugar, carbohydrate, from carbon dioxide and water. As a result of this reaction, the energy in the sun's rays is stored inside the sugar molecule produced. The following formula summarizes the reaction that takes place during the process by which unusable solar energy is transformed into usable chemical energy. And only by Allah can something that is unusable by man be made usable. Only by Allah. And this is the chemical formula. I know everybody wants to see that. And now we're going to move into another amazing miracle that is seen in the Quran that was not known about until the last century, and maybe Megan can share some light on this as we get into this. Surah Alaq, the cloth, Surah 96, verses 15 and 16. No, indeed, if he does not stop, we will grab him by the forelock, a lying, sinful forelock. The expression, the lying, sinful forelock, in the above verse is most interesting. Research carried out in recent years has revealed that the prefrontal area, we call it the prefrontal cortex of the brain, which is responsible for the management of particular functions of the brain, lies in the frontal part of the skull. And I'll show you a picture of this in just a minute. Scientists only discovered the functions of this area, which the Quran pointed out 1400 years ago, in the last 60 years. If we look inside the brain at the front of the head, we will find the frontal area of the cerebrum. A book entitled Essentials of Anatomy and Physiology, which includes the results of the latest research on functions of this area, says the following. The motivation and the foresight to plan and initiate movements occur in the anterior portion of the frontal lobes, the prefrontal area. This is a region of association cortex, and this is where this quote came from. The book also says, in relation to its involvement in motivation, the prefrontal area is also thought to be the functional center for aggression. And this is where I thought that Megan might chime in a minute, inshallah. As you all know, that Megan is a mental health counselor. I am a therapist, so I love this stuff. So if you see the picture I have up here, this is this prefrontal area right here, just as it talks about in the Holy Quran, that we are now looking at in terms of aggression. And actually, one of the reasons that is used as an argument for why young males should not be tried as adults is because the prefrontal area is not developed until they're about 25 years of age. So in other words, when you take a 17-year-old who has, I hate to say this, murdered someone, and you try them as an adult, you're trying someone whose brain was not an adult as an adult. So this is one of the big arguments about that. Yes, ma'am.
What is the full development for females?
Females is about 22 usually.
So who came up with you're an adult at 18?
Allahu Alam. I don't know. But we clearly are not. I mean, anybody that's a parent here clearly knows that you're not an adult at 18 years of age. Matter of fact, you're not an adult. Most people are not an adult at 21. And I don't mean that to offend my young people. You know I love you dearly. But we were having this conversation this week about what does it mean to be independent. And I was arguing that independence means that I pay my own rent, my own electric bill, my own car insurance. I put my petrol in my car. I pay my own phone bill. That's what it means to be independent to me. Does any young person want to argue with me about that? Yes, Ibrahim.
I'm not arguing about that. I'm just saying that I thought the male brain we develops after 22 years. The female brain develops earlier than that.
Yeah, the female is usually seen at 22. They mature ahead of us, and the male at 25. That's what research shows.
That means women are more intelligent than men.
Well, I'm not going to go there because it wouldn't be politically correct. But my mommy can. Okay. Now, I wanted to throw that out because there's a tremendous amount of research and debate about this subject currently because of the correctional environment and how many people were being tried as adults. So it's very interesting. Now, I want you to listen up for this part and the next part really good, because this is the part that I'm going to really want you to discuss when we break into groups. And of course, the way we do that, as you know in the past, is one person from each group, and I don't care if more than one, but you come up and share what you learned after you break up into groups. But in Surah Ra'd, the thunder, Surah 13 and 28, only in the remembrance of Allah can the heart find peace. And I think today, by the way, I was the Khatib at Masjid Tazkiyah Friday, and my khutbah was about love in Islam. Of course, I cried a large portion of the khutbah and sobbed in the prayer. And a large portion of the people were sobbing and crying as well. But it's just amazing how, I'll share this on a personal level. For 7 years, I did not cry. My heart had so hardened because of things that had happened to me. And I know it's very hard for you guys to imagine that based on how you see me today. But the reason I'm pointing that out is that my heart changed because of Islam, because of remembering Allah. And I really believe that my heart changing and my father seeing that, witnessing that, is why he became a Muslim. Because my father, when we were growing up, may Allah cause him to rest in peace and give him the highest level of paradise, did not know whether he believed in God or not. He told us when we were growing up, I don't know if there's a God or not. I mean, he just didn't make had no trouble telling us that. So it was reported in one study published in the International Journal of Psychiatry and Medicine, an important scientific source in the world of medicine, that people who describe themselves as having no religious beliefs become ill more frequently and have shorter lifespans. According to the results of the research, those with no beliefs are twice as likely to suffer stomach-intestine diseases than believers. And the mortality rate from respiratory diseases is 66% times higher than that of believers. Now these are this is empirical research, folks, that comes up with this. And I think it's just amazing. I'm reading a book right now called The Inside Tract, T-R-A-C-T. And it's just amazing because this book has been sort of reinforcing what I'm learning from the Holy Quran. According to research... Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Is that where you wanted me to go? Okay.
Okay, thank you.
According to research by David B. Larson of the American National Health Research Center and his team, comparisons of devout and non-religious Americans have given very surprising results. For instance, religious people suffer 60% less heart disease than those with little or no religious belief. The suicide rate among them is 100% lower. They suffer far lower levels of high blood pressure, and this ratio is 7-to-1 among smokers. Now, I really want you to think about this, because when you break into groups, what I'm going to ask you to do is to talk about in your own personal life how you have witnessed this. And the other two things we're going to talk about. I'm not going to tell you yet. I'm going to keep you wondering. And this reference came from Patrick Glenn, a book called God the Evidence, The Reconciliation of Faith and Reason in a Post-Secular World. There's the publisher right there, page 80. Book was published in 1997. Secular psychologists tend to refer to similar figures as psychological effects. This means that belief raises people's spirits, and I got to stop here, because in the psychological world predominantly does not recognize ruh. It does not recognize God. Isn't this incongruent? Yeah. Because Islamically, from the Islamic psychological perspective, we look at the self, which is the ego, we look at the ruh, which is the spirit of Allah, and of course your heart, not the one that ticks, but that spiritual heart that's in there. This means that belief raises people's spirits and contributes to health. This explanation may indeed be reasonable, but a more striking conclusion emerges when the subject is examined. Belief in Allah is much stronger than any other psychological influence. Now, I got to interrupt here because in cognitive behavioral therapy, otherwise known as CBT, we actually help people change their cognitions, the way they think. There was a preacher that picked up on this a couple of years ago, and I can't remember his name, but he would always say, "Stop your stinking thinking." So he would refer to thinking that was not good as stinking thinking. It had a nice little rhyme, and people picked up on it. The wide-ranging research into the connection between religious belief and physical health carried out by Dr. Herbert Benson of the Harvard Medical Faculty has produced surprising conclusions in this area. Despite not being a believer himself, and this is what I'm amazed about, Dr. Benson has concluded that worship and belief in Allah have a more positive effect on human health than that observed in anything else. Benson states that he has concluded that no belief provides as much mental peace as belief in Allah. And that's found, here's the Timeless Healing, New York, Simon & Schuster. Now, actually, I believe he uses Allah. But whether he uses God or Allah, I just think it's amazing. But I believe it's Allah. That's what I saw when I read it. I mean, I wouldn't have put Allah if it said God, I don't think. Yeah, but we can go back and look at that. That's a good thing. I hope I didn't change it, because that's not normally how I would roll, because I usually give a quote like it is. But I wanted to add something. Did somebody have a question? I want to make sure. I wanted to add, because in the Khutbah al-Hajjah, which I recited at the beginning of the class today, and what the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam always recited before any speech he gave, he says, he who or she who is guided by Allah, no one can misguide them. He or she who is not guided by Allah, there is no guidance for them. Look how that ties into this ideology about peace in the heart of the believers. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
The last sentence of the slide, can you elaborate on that more? Was that a typo, or was it supposed to say what it said?
Benson states that he has concluded that no belief provides as much mental peace as belief in Allah. That is absolutely not a typo.
It seems contradictory. Can you elaborate on it? Am I reading it wrong?
In other words, there is no belief that provides mental peace as much as this belief in God. That's what it's saying. Okay.
I think he's talking about the slide.
Are you talking about the slide before?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let's see. What sentence, brother?
All right, so Benson states that he has concluded that no belief provides as much mental peace as belief. Right? You see what I'm saying? Am I reading that wrong?
I don't see it though. I'm sorry.
He has concluded that no belief provides as much mental peace as belief in Allah. So no matter what you believe, you're not going to get the ultimate peace unless you believe in God.
Right.
Exactly.
I'm reading it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what it says very clearly.
Yeah, there might be like a
Those two lines.
Thank you, Dr. Hawk.
I am Batla.
No problem. Okay.
Batla.
Dr. Batla, okay.
Just
You guys are completely confusing me this morning, but anyway, there's nothing like me going off on a note of humility, because I'm totally lost now. Okay. Is this where I'm supposed to be, folks? MashaAllah, alhamdulillah. What is the reason for this connection between belief in the human soul and body? The conclusion reached by the secular researcher Benson is, in his own words, that the human body and mind are regulated to believe in Allah. And this is from a non-believer. And what always blows my mind is, how can you still not believe? You produce this kind of research, and then how can you not believe? But you know what it says, he who Allah guides, no one can misguide. Who is not guided by Allah, there's no guide for him. So if God doesn't guide you, you can get all the knowledge that you want. It's just not going to happen. You just don't get it. Your consciousness isn't awakened. This fact, which the world of medicine has slowly begun to appreciate, is a secret revealed in the Quran in these words: only in the remembrance of Allah can the heart find peace. And this is one of the things I pointed out in my khutbah on Friday, is that the thing that you remember the most is the thing that you love the most. And let's think about that for a minute. For those of us who are happily married, our thought of our spouse hardly ever leaves our mind. We wake up in the morning and the first thing we want to see is them. During the day we think about them. When we're sleeping we dream about them. Is that right for those of you who've had happy marriages? And then Allah says you're a garment to them and they're a garment. So you're wrapped up in them. Absolutely. Now, let's think about another thing. How close do we sit to the dinner table? About how many inches is between your stomach and the table? Nivan?
An inch or two? An inch or two?
It's not far, but isn't that indicative of something that we love? We get close to what we love. Now, I've never met many human beings except a few people in my practice that have eating disorders that don't absolutely love food. And all you got to do is start a conversation about food and you'll quickly find what people love the most. Now, let's talk about this a little bit, because if your heart, if your eyes have been glued to the NFL when the NFL is on, then that tells me that you really love NFL. Now, I'm not condemning that, okay? And if your heart's glued to the tennis this week, you really love tennis. Because that's where your heart is. So, only in the remembrance of Allah can the heart find peace. So, if you're not finding peace, I think we have to ask ourselves the question, how much am I remembering Allah? And that will be indicative of how much you really love Allah. And I think we really have to look at that. Because we live in a world that I think it's the largest industry in the world today is the pharmaceuticals for mental illnesses, psychopharmaceuticals. So you look at the television and it says, well, if you've had a gloomy day and you didn't have a smile on your face when you woke up this morning, because everybody wants to get up at 5:30 and hit the 408, right? Then you should try Cymbalta, or you should try Prozac, or give me another one, you guys, because I know you got to see this stuff on television. There you go, all of them, you all know them. So how many people think that since the Quran says we are going to be tested, he promised us that you might not have a day when that commercial is whispering, not actually whispering, but screaming at you. Maybe I should go to the doctor and get one of these pills.
Actually on billboards now, brother.
Yeah. So maybe, just maybe, it would help if we just remembered Allah and got into His book. Alhamdulillah. Now, I want to add a caveat to this. I am not advocating that you should never ever use antidepressants or anything like that. Please don't misunderstand me. But what I am advocating is that in a world where marketing is influencing you so strongly that perhaps before you go to, and this really, I got to do this because this is my field. If you're going to get on antidepressants, don't go see a doctor. Go see a psychiatrist, because that's a specialist. Because we don't have a test that we can plug up to your brain or take some blood from you and tell whether you have a serotonin challenge. So go see somebody that specializes. I know a lot of doctors, they will tell you that they only took a few hours of psychology in their whole course of 8 years of study. So don't go to a doctor because you saw a commercial and get some drugs, okay? Yes, Dr. Bradley.
Serotonin is decreased at old age.
Yes, serotonin decreases at old age. And when you get older, and I'm not old yet, but sometimes I wake up and I would like to have a crane to pick me up out of bed because I feel a little sore. And I could immediately say, well, maybe I need this commercial. But I'm just a little sore, that's all. Okay? The reason why those who believe in Allah, who pray to and trust in Him are psychologically and physically healthier is that they behave in accordance with the purpose of their creation. Philosophies and systems which contradict human creation always lead to pain and unhappiness. And when I think about some of the certain belief systems and voodoo dolls and those kind of things that actually focus on how can I hurt somebody else. How can your heart be at peace when you hurt somebody else, when you were created actually to serve Allah? That's your whole purpose. Modern medicine is now tending towards the realization of this truth. As Patrick Glenn put it, scientific research in psychology over the past 25 years has demonstrated that religious belief is one of the most consistent correlates of overall mental health and happiness. And this is in Glenn's book, God, the Evidence, the Reconciliation of Faith and Reason. I don't know if Glenn is a believer or not. The previous guy from Harvard is not a believer that I mentioned, but I don't know if he's a believer or not. Okay, yes, sister. The post-secular world is, when we talk about the post-secular world, we're talking about the non-spiritual world. So we talk about secular reality, the world without religion, and then we talk about the spiritual world. Okay. So the next thing, and I'm really going to want you to focus on this whenever you break up into your groups, is forgiveness and its benefits on health. So listen up, folks. And Surah Araf, the heights, Surah 7, verse 199. Hold to forgiveness, command what is right, and turn away from the ignorant. And Surah Nur, the light, Surah 24 and verse 22. They should rather pardon and overlook. Would you not love Allah to forgive you? Allah is ever forgiving, most merciful. This is such a powerful verse. And I think sometimes, though, we get it a little wrong. So I'm going to step out on a limb today. When it says hold to forgiveness and command what is right, the only way you can do that is to have a good knowledge of what? Quran and Sunnah. So, can you forgive something that's contrary to the Quran and the Sunnah? No. Can you be tolerant in understanding that you have also sinned? Okay.
So Allah does not forgive anything that's against the Quran and the Sunnah?
Allah forgives everything, but by what? How does He forgive? Repenting and amending. What is forgiveness really for?
For your own soul.
For your own soul. So in other words, if you are carrying an animosity in your heart, but the reason I'm doing this is I want to make sure you don't get this blanket doormat approach here. And by the way, the box is going around. I want to thank you for every dollar that you give this organization so we can continue to do dawah and help people, families in need sometimes. May Allah bless you for everything that you give to ISLEM. Thank you. So what I want to make sure that you don't, a lot of people when they say forgiveness, they think suddenly they should become God. But it also says that you have to command what is right. And so this, I think, gets very hard in the role as a parent sometimes. And that's what you can talk about some in your role, in your group, you know. Because you want to demonstrate forgiveness to your children, but you have a responsibility to demonstrate to them that what is right, according to the Quran, is that God said that if your mom and dad were upset with you, that who's upset with you? Allah is upset with you. So that means there's something in that verse that says that it's okay for mom and dad to be upset with their children. Now, does that mean it's upset to verbally abuse them? No, that's not what it's saying. But if you love what Allah loves and hate what Allah hates, and your children are doing something that hates Allah, then you don't reinforce that behavior. In your house, which is a Muslim household, you do not tolerate certain things. So I just want to make sure that I'm not putting out this message that you just, anything goes. Because that's not the case. That is not the way Allah operates. And it clearly says that we love what Allah loves and we hate what Allah hates. And our children should know through our very behavior what Allah loves and what Allah hates. That's how they learn. Yes, brother. Yes, Brother Ibrahim.
I just read that
You were doing what? I'm sorry?
So if our parents are not happy with us, then Allah's not happy with us.
Yes,
But you also said it's not right for parents to curse at us then if we're doing something wrong.
right. We don't curse at our children. That's not acceptable because Allah doesn't like that. So, but it's very clear that if your parents are not happy with you, now let me give an example because I want to make sure this is really clear. Let's just say that I want my daughter to marry so-and-so. Just because maybe he's got a nice fat bank account. His deen is not too good. Maybe he doesn't even have any. Is that pleasing to Allah? No. Now, if I'm upset with my daughter because she's not going to marry this dude because I'll know she's taken care of, is that applicable in this situation? No, because my intentions are not straight up and down. So when it talks about your parents being upset with you, why is the only reason you can be upset with your children?
They're taking you away from Allah.
They're taking you away from Allah. They're not doing something that pleases Allah. And so that is the judgment. That is the criterion. You know, you love what Allah loves and you hate what Allah hates. But being upset with them doesn't mean that you punish them all the time either. But it does mean you don't tolerate that. And it says in the latter days that parents will become the mistresses of the children. And that's exactly what's happened. So I was listening to a story in the masjid where a single mother went out, worked 2 jobs, bought a pair of, I think it was Adidas, for her child. And the child said to the mother, I'm not wearing those blankety blank shoes. And I'm not going to even try to go there because it's not acceptable to do that. But he basically cursed his mother. And guess what Mama did? Mama put her little behind parts in the car, went down to the local mall, and got him the Pumas that he wanted. Now, folks, we got to know what the hadith says. That's not right. That's when you have an opportunity to teach your children about gratefulness. And if you want a pair of Pumas instead of Adidas that I paid over $100 for, then I suggest you take your little behind parts over to McDonald's or Taco Bell, wherever you can get a job with your limited education at this point, and buy your own Pumas. But we've got to get a backbone, folks, because really and truly in this day and age, and I wonder, Megan, if you agree with me, what I see in practice is that we as parents have really, really lost our backbone. And I know for a fact that I can say that about me as a father. I was far, far too easy. And as I look back on it, I know that I was not firm in certain areas. I'm not going to beat myself up about it, but I'm aware of it. So now I can teach other people, maybe they won't make the same mistake. Those who do not abide by the moral value of the Quran find it very difficult to forgive others, because they are easily angered by any error committed. However, Allah has advised the faithful that forgiveness is more proper. Islam was the first religion to introduce blood money, so that Allah is going to handle the person for what they did. Because ultimately, forgiveness is in the hands of Allah. But if somebody murders somebody in my family, I can demonstrate mercy by saying, well, I'm really sad, I'm very distraught about my loss, but if you could come up with $250,000, it might soothe me just a tiny bit, and I'll let this go. It's never going to solve your pain, right? It's not going to replace the person. But the context of the thing is mercy, folks. That do you want somebody else to lose their life? You have the opportunity to keep somebody from losing their life. They're going to get their punishment when they get to Allah. So you, as a human being, have the opportunity to exercise mercy, because they are going to get what's coming to them. Because there is no judge like the judge, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because, yes, doctor.
It's written in the Quran, eye for eye, not more or not less.
Right, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, but forgiveness is better. So Allah says it is better to forgive. If you are elevating yourself as a believer, you become a person of forgiveness. You can forgive your children. For example, I hope this has never happened to anybody here, but I know it's happened to some believers because they told me that your children curse you, call you a name, use one of the most disgusting curse words out there. I can forgive the act, but does that mean I tolerate it ever again? Absolutely not. You're not coming up in my house and calling me a name, because I deserve to be respected. And Allah doesn't like you to disrespect me. That's unacceptable. But you see, parents are weakening today. And I hear parents that they get cussed at by their children. And that's when you say, you see that door over there? You get out that door till you can respect me, and you're not going to do that in my house. Because Allah doesn't like that. And let's just think about it for a minute. The young man that carried his mother on her back and completed all of her Hajj for her. On his back, yes. Came to Rasulullah feeling very proud of himself. And Rasulullah ﷺ said, you could never repay your mother for one birth pain. So, young people, if your mother treats you with love and kindness, remember that no matter what you ever do for her, you could never repay one of her birth pains. That's powerful. Those who do not abide by the moral values of the Quran find it very difficult to forgive each other. And what really makes me sad is I will hear believers say, I can never forgive them. I will never forgive them as long as I live. You can hear the anger in that, right? Anybody? Oh, I don't want to ask. Because they are easily angered by any error committed. However, Allah has advised the faithful that forgiveness is more proper. The repayment of a bad action is one equivalent to it. But if someone pardons and puts things right, his reward is with Allah. Surely Allah does not like those who oppose themselves and oppress those and others. Oppression is one of the greatest sins in Islam. We cannot oppress our children and our parents. Yeah, we should not oppress our children.
What is oppression?
Oppression is... Who would like to define oppression? That's amazing. Usually I'm really good at coming up with definitions. Anybody?
It's like a dictator. He's oppressing his people. You know, like the Soviet Union or China, when you can have one bird and that's it. They're oppressing their people. It's like you're putting your thumb on them, you have to do what I say. Yeah.
It's...
According to dictionary,
Yes, thank you.
the exercise of authority or power in a brutal, cruel, or unjust manner.
You hear that? The exercise of power in a brutal, cruel, or unjust manner. Here's a great example. Children should be seen and not heard. I'm your daddy, and I said to shut up. Now, I never did that in my house, but I'm just giving you the example because I'm sure that somebody besides me heard that. That's oppressive because that child grows up thinking, I don't have a voice. What I say goes around here. Don't do as I say do, or as I do as I say do, by God. And you're laughing because you've heard that before. And believe me, I've heard it too. So, that's not by my mommy, no. That is, folks, an example of oppression. Drop! What are you crying for? I'll give you something to make you cry. That's oppression. I think we're going to have a lot to discuss when we break up in groups. Okay. So, well, I think we can. Yeah. We'll be able to carry this on because I'm not finished. So what we'll do is we're at slide 238. Can everybody remember that? 238. So, do you want me to count you off to divide you into groups? Is that easier, or can you do it yourselves? However many it takes to get groups of about 7, because that's a pretty good number for a discussion. 7 or 8, no more than 8 in a group. And Lori's going to facilitate. I love you all for the sake of Allah. What you're supposed to discuss is forgiveness and how prayer heals things, how having a peaceful heart. Yeah, Lori, I think that one works. What you've learned today in class and how you've witnessed it in life. Oh, that one's not good. Here you go. This one's working, I think. Sorry about that. And Lord, I love you all for the sake of Allah. I will see you next week, inshallah. We will continue to talk about forgiveness. And we're even going to go in and start talking about next week prayer and how prayer changes your life. And this has been proven also in the psychological world now. So today, we're going to talk about forgiveness and how your heart is at peace if you remember Allah. How your
prayer,
yeah.
How what?
How your heart is at peace if you remember Allah.
Can I ask you a question? This and you can answer.
Yes.
I was raised here in America all my life as a Muslim Arabic girl. So I have to worry about the cultural ways and the Islamic ways. And many people think that I'm oppressed because I can't leave until I get married, leave my parents' house. There are certain things that I cannot do. So I just wanted, I can't really explain how my life is. It's normal life to me, but other people think I'm being oppressed.
And let me just say this before you, it doesn't matter how other people think. It is what does the Quran say in the Sunnah. Now here's what I got to say to that. You have to be very clear that if you're being oppressed based on culture, that is not religion. So for example, and I hate to do this at the end of the class, but I just got to do what's right. I had a man say to me one time, Imam Sykes, I'd really like you to help me find a husband for my daughter. So I said, well, what's the criteria? He said, it's not much. I want him to be PhD, powder white, and Pakistani. That's what he said. Now, that's pretty hard to find, folks. So I said, well, I'll be working on that, probably when I die. But the point I'm making is that from the Quran? Because actually, what did the Prophet say? He said, marry away from your tribe. That's preferable. Run, Forrest, run. So if your parents are mad because you're not fulfilling culture, that's not Islam, folks. Because that's actually shirk. That's making culture God. And that's the biggest sin in Islam, and that's a big problem we have in our ummah. So you have to be real clear. If I'm making mom and dad happy fulfilling the Quran and the Sunnah, I'm on the winning side. But I don't have to make them happy when it comes to cultural issues, because culture is not my religion. Islam is my religion.
Am I allowed to move out?
You're absolutely allowed to move out. Yes, absolutely.
But I was told that 3 days a woman cannot leave the house, but more than 3 days without a man.
Send me an email, sister, and let me get you some proofs on that. All right. And forgive me, but I've got a train to catch. So I love you all. Please break up into groups. I'll get to watch the camera to hear what you had to say, and I can't wait to see that. I love you all. Salam alaikum. Mason, you'll take care of the computer? Okay.
I'm safe, brother.
Yes, thank you. Jazakallahu khairan. You're welcome.
What is that?
I'll use this next week, so that'll keep your curiosity up. I'll use this next week. Thank you, sorry. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
How are you?
Alhamdulillah. Assalamu alaikum, sister. I gotta run. Good to see you.
I'm letting that person off. So that's the hard thing. She's not listening to her. She's like, that's man's word. I can't do that. Let me just go with her.
is us, and we're constantly sinning, and we're constantly forgetful, and we're constantly making mistakes throughout our day, why should we not forgive people that transgress or make mistakes towards us? And also we hit on the point that Sheikh Sykes was talking about in regards to our children